And if we know that food that is labelled has an effect on behaviour, what the hell are we going to do when we have no idea what crap we're eating? I mean, this is how the organic farming is being put under threat. Because once the labelling is removed, how is the consumer to determine whether the piece of meat they're buying is cloned, is contaminated with growth hormone? You know, it shouldn't be any surprise to you that Texas is the largest provider of prime beef in the US, and where do the biggest people live? Yeah? That growth hormone doesn't just stop in the beef. I mean, there's the physical evidence. I lived in Texas for 4.5 years. I mean, they're monsters. It's like living in a land of giants. Thank God Ritalin wasn't around when my young apprentice had his problems. But this is an extremely pernicious drug. This was in the Daily Mail. Literally, I think this was the beginning of the week. And, you know, here we have a situation, again, where the media are telling us what's going on. Look at the headline here, the sub-headline. Thousands of hyperactive children are being given Ritalin, which can stunt growth, or even the schizophrenic drugs. Are they victims of greedy drug firms and doctors too quick to diagnose a condition many say doesn't exist? In the US right now, and this is actually quoted in this article, the article's here if anybody wants to take a look at it. In the US, 10% of all school-age children are prescribed Ritalin. 10%. 10%. And it's increasing in the UK. From this article again, perhaps most disturbing is the suggestion that ADHD is nothing more than the invention of pharmaceutical companies who have used clinical trials to create a disease that can be treated with their drugs. Last year, the NHS spent 28 million on Ritalin alone. Now, Ritalin is a stimulant. I mean, basically, it's likened to cocaine. I mean, we'd be mortified if any parent gave their kids cocaine. But this is effectively what we're doing. In fact, the doctors actually don't understand how Ritalin works because it's a stimulant, yet it has the opposite effect. It calms them down. And some of you may have seen a Panorama broadcast a few weeks ago where they were talking to families that were prescribing Ritalin. And this mother of a hyperactive young girl said, you know, well, yeah, it's nice to actually sort of see her calm and sitting at the table, but it's not my daughter. It's not my daughter. We're condemning these kids to a life of prescribed drugs. You know, we are, basically, it is becoming a zombie nation. And we're cutting away the possibility of any spiritual connect at any juncture in their life. Which, of course, is by design. And for the adults, then it's Prozac. And I had a doctor friend of mine, and I asked him, you know, why it was that, you know, out of the people that I knew, it was always more women that were on Prozac than it was the men. And he said, well, that's very easy. He said, because the guys have to be dead before they go see a doctor. He said, whereas the women are much more comfortable to go see their doctor, and the doctor is just too quick to prescribe Prozac. And then now what's happening is a lot of doctors have little more than a database. You know, what's your problem? Oh, stress? Shh. Oh, Prozac. You know, I mean, they're not even making any informed decision. It's just key in the information into the database, and they're being paid $250,000 a year to provide that information. It's outrageous. Oh, and obviously this was for my benefit. You know, the daily super pill for men over 50. Well, apparently this is the basis, this drug is the same basis as this experiment here. Well, this was on the front page of The Independent at the beginning of this month, Friday the 2nd of November. And they tried it out fortunately they tried it out in mice before they decided to offer it to the 50-year-old men. And this is on the front page of The Independent. It says, it can run for hours at 20 meters a minute without getting tired. It lives longer, has more sex, eats more without gaining weight. Could the science that created this be applied to humans? Yeah, bring it on. They're telling us, it's in our face, You know, we are a nation addicted to pills. Not because we want to be addicted, but because the pharmaceutical industry needs us to be addicted. It's critical. Big Pharma has a very, very simple philosophy. From the moment a life form is conceived until that life form deceases, it is a revenue stream. From conception to death. What is interesting in this book, The Corporate Crime, the guy, John Braithwaite, actually tries to understand the mentality. Because it actually rocks him that the people he's talking to, the people he's interviewing, all seem like nice family men. Individually. And I'm sure Joseph Mengele was a lovely guy. But collectively, these guys take on a completely different persona. There is not an ounce of humanity in their agenda. There's not an ounce of compassion. It is totally about profits. It's a bit like the American military trying to find ways to kill people remotely. You know, if you can remove the face-to-face contact, it's a lot easier to get people to do things that they wouldn't do if they can actually look in the whites of the eyes of the individual. So Codex is a very, very complex structure, and I mean, this is just sort of an introduction.
Mr. Scott Tipps began serving as a US delegate to Codex in June of 2000. During the first meetings, he did everything he could to communicate with the head of the US delegation.
I, in a flurry of notes, passed comments and suggestions and the like to Elizabeth Yetley, who was the American delegate there, and it made no impact. In fact, the only impact I had was to call her during a break and basically be very tough with her about a particular clause that she was trying to remove from the final report. That particular sentence or clause basically said that the United States supports the right of consumers to have free access to vitamins and minerals, and she had unilaterally yanked that from the final reports.
This attitude by Ms. Yetley, who is an employee of the US Food and Drug Administration, is reflective of Codex meetings in general. In an attempt to shine light on those who are unilaterally making public policy in private, health freedom advocate John Hamill took a small video camera into 2 Codex meetings in 1998. These grainy videos are all that remain of the tapes, which mysteriously disappeared.
Moving right along, agenda number 5 on vitamins and minerals.
So you're going to strike that second paragraph?
Well, these are draft positions. They go in as draft positions. So they're not the final nor the formal position.
You've seen the letter from Ron Paul then, and this was signed by Ron Paul, Congressman Stump, and Congressman Cook.
We have received a lot of mail. We've looked at all of it.
And you acknowledge that this represents the will of the American people and the will of Congress, correct?
There's a wide range of opinions on this one.
Despite multiple written requests and the intervention of a US congressman, the FDA refused to answer any questions about Codex, dietary supplements, or even labeling for this documentary.
Jeśli myślicie, że te wszystkie rzeczy są wymysłem jedynie poszukiwaczy spisków, teorii spiskowych, to polecam Wam polską rządową stronę Inspekcji Jakości Handlowej Artykułów Rolno-Spożywczych. Na tej stronie znajdziecie broszurkę i otwiera się PDF z pięknym plakatem Codex Alimentarius, śliczne jabłuszko z napisem Polska, logo World Health Organization i FAO, czyli Food and Agricultural Organization of United Nations. Tutaj różne informacje rozpisane, co i jak z komisją kodeksu, wszystko po polsku. Jak to działa na świecie. Polecam tą stronę wszystkim osobom, które uważają historię o kodeksie żywnościowym jako bzdury i wyssane z palca dywagacje, spiskowe teorie dziejów.